Good morning, gardeners. It's Saturday, January 30th, and it is 7:30 in the morning, and overnight we had one of the coldest air masses of the year come in here on the southeastern coast of North Carolina. We got down to 23.4 degrees Fahrenheit, and today I want to discuss with you the concept of microclimates and go microclimate hunting in my yard, because now is the ideal time to do so. Microclimates are a very real thing, and they are a very important concept to understand in your yard. Microclimates can be either where cold air collects in your yard or where cold air drains away in your yard. And they can make a really big difference to growing conditions, to marginal plants that you decide to grow in your climate. In a typical quarter-acre residential plot, it is not unusual to see microclimate fluctuations of 3 to 5 degrees, maybe even more if you have some hills in your yard. And that's a significant variation, because 5 degrees is half a hardiness zone. And that can be the difference between a marginal fruit tree thriving or dying depending on the conditions. Say you're like me, I live in zone 8A and I want to grow citrus in ground. The overwhelming majority of citrus need a zone 9A or warmer climate. However, there are some very hardy citrus types that can survive in a zone 8B. So finding a warm microclimate that can give me half a hardiness zone is the difference between success and failure for growing these hardy varieties of citrus in my marginal citrus growing climate. Similarly, if you live in a place like Florida or Louisiana or Texas, or warm areas that may not get a whole lot of chill hours, and you want to grow something like peaches or blueberries or something that need chill hours to bear fruit, you can purposefully plant your fruit trees in an area where the cold air drains to. If you plant them in a low spot in your yard where cold air settles, you can actually see 3 to 5 degrees of additional cool at night. And those colder temperatures, if you live in a warm spot, may actually allow you to grow those fruits that need chill hours. So you can use the cold to your advantage as well. You don't always have to avoid the cold. It can help you. So right now I'm going to go microclimate hunting in my yard, and the perfect time to do that is right at sunrise, when you get a nice solid frost, because you want the sun to have risen far enough that you have some daylight that you can clearly see the frost, but you don't want the sun to have pierced through the trees, because you don't want it to burn off the frost. So what I want to do is I want to look for areas of very thick frost in my yard and areas where there is no frost, because those frost-free areas are going to be warm microclimates. The places that are generally warm microclimates in your yard are areas that are on the tops of little tiny hills, because cold air tends to flow like a river. They flow down low spots and channels, so air tends to settle in lower areas in your yard. You also want to look for radiative heat sources, like the foundation of your house. The foundation of your house tends to absorb heat from the ground and also heat from the sun and radiate that back out all night. So it's typical that around your house you will have a warmer microclimate. So let's go microclimate hunting. So right now I'm in the rear of my property, and this area gets very thick frost because it is wide open. But one thing I am noticing is over here by where I put my pawpaw trees, the frost starts to get a little patchy. There's a little bit of patchy frost on top of this pawpaw tree, and here I have a little canopy of loblolly pines back here that kind of extend over the rear of my property. So I've been noticing that in this area right here, it doesn't really get a whole lot of frost. So I think, normally I would think that an area like this, there's clearly a hill right here. Normally cold air would rush down here and drain, but about 500 feet or less behind my property, there is this swampy area. So it gets really low back here in the swamp, and I think the cold air tends to drain past my fence through here. So you can clearly see that thanks to using this frost as a guide, There's some pretty thick frost that is in my my grass right here, but over here the frost kind of ends. It's glistening right here, and then it doesn't really frost much against the fence. You can see some weeds growing through my weed barrier. They are all frost free. It didn't frost right up against the fence here, so I'm looking into some more citrus that can do all right in a zone 8B, and I think the ideal location to plant my citrus is going to be right in this spot right here underneath these loblolly pines as a canopy, because it appears that the cold air drains away into the low spot in the swamp behind my house, and also I think I get a little bit of heat protection from this canopy. And I've seen people in Florida in zone 9s grow bananas underneath these pine tree or live oak tree canopies. And normally zone 9 bananas can't survive because a hard freeze kills them down to the base. But they seem to be able to use those tree canopies to their advantage, and I think I will be able to use those tree canopies to my advantage as well. So this little bed right here would be a bit of a warmer microclimate, I think, by several degrees. So this is why you want to survey your yard right as the sun is rising and look at that glistening frost, because you can see this appears to be a bit of a warmer spot. Conversely, over where I have my espalier fig trees, you can see even the weed barrier is frozen solid over here. So this is a colder end of my yard. These figs are frozen solid, but that's okay because I'm in zone 8, so 23.4 degrees shouldn't really hurt a fig tree here in the end of January because they're kind of at peak dormancy. So that's kind of why I chose this spot over here. I wanted to put my more frost tolerant plants over on this side of the yard. As I previously mentioned, typically the best microclimate in your yard is going to be up against the south-facing wall of your home, because your south-facing wall gets full sun exposure all day, and it absorbs that sunshine and it radiates it back at night. So here you can see the south-facing wall of my house. That's where I'm keeping my container fig trees right now during this hard freeze. And you can clearly see in the patches of clover in my yard, you can see how thick the frost is. Yet if I move closer to my foundation, you will notice that there is less frost on the clover overall. And then when I get to the mulch bed, there is no frost at all. So it did not frost right up against my house. None of these, there's no frost on any of these plants. This 4-foot wide landscaping area for my foundation, that area is pretty much frost free most of the year up against the house. So that is why I have my Meyer lemon, my Lila semi-dwarf avocado, and my trifoliate orange grafted Owari satsuma to keep it small on that trifoliate rootstock, planted right up against my house, because I know that this is probably the warmest spot in my yard. And it's so warm that I'm probably getting half a hardiness zone of radiative heat protection from the foundation alone. Not to mention these plant jackets with some lights, I can pick up another half of a hardy zone or more. So I can turn my zone 8A in this location into a 9A, 9B. And that is what makes it possible for me to grow this avocado tree and these couple of marginal citrus trees in my climate. So I just wanted to take a few minutes and discuss microclimates with you all and show you how to find them. It's incredibly helpful to know your yard this intimately because it can really help you when planting landscaping, especially edible landscaping, because you can figure out ahead of time where is the best places to place all of your fruit trees so you can best design your yard for the most success. So everybody, I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, please hit that like button, and if you haven't already subscribed to the channel, please subscribe for future updates and more videos like these. If you're curious about any of the products that I use in my garden, everything I use is linked in my Amazon storefront in the video description. Thank you all again so much for watching, and I hope to see all of you again on the next video. When we first got Dale, he was afraid of every garage door that would open. He would pee on every mailbox. He was afraid of every noise. Sometimes he'd freeze up on the sidewalk and you wouldn't be able to get him to move and you'd have to carry him. Now he's being a good boy and he's actually walking, looking, well, most of the time, and not just sniffing around with his nose. And look, there's even some slack in the leash. Such a good boy.